You assume the worst part was hearing the deadbolt slide shut exactly at midnight. But you are wrong. The worst part was watching my mother smile behind the glass, raising a flute of vintage champagne as she texted me that I did not belong. I stood shivering in the freezing Colorado wind, locked out of the estate named after the grandmother we buried 2 months ago. Then a black sedan pulled up and a dead woman told me to get inside. My name is Harper Lawson, and if there is one thing 33 years of navigating my family has taught me, it is that hope is a dangerous thing, but denial is lethal. I stood in the foyer of Hartwell House, gripping a glass of sparkling water because I needed to keep a clear head, watching the people I shared blood with erase the memory of the woman who built this roof over their heads. It was New Year's Eve in Boulder, Colorado. Outside, the wind was howling down the flat irons, carrying a temperature that hovered somewhere around 5 degrees below zero. Inside, the air was perfumed with expensive lees, roasting lamb, and the sharp metallic scent of ambition. I had come because my mother, Diana, had sent a text message 3 days ago that simply read, "Please come home. We need to start over for Mom." For Mom, that was the hook. My grandmother, Genevieve Hart, had been the only person in this family who saw me as something other than a utility bill or a fix-it ticket. We had buried her 2 months ago. The funeral had been a masterpiece of performance art, with my father Robert delivering a eulogy about legacy, while his eyes scanned the crowd for potential investors, and my brother Tyler weeping into a handkerchief that was perfectly folded to show his monogram. I had stood in the back, dry-eyed and numb, because my grief was a private, jagged thing that did not fit their schedule. But tonight was supposed to be the reconciliation, the slate wiping. I smoothed the fabric of my dress, a sensible navy sheath that cost $300, a rounding error compared to the $5,000 gown my mother was wearing, and tried to smile at a passing waiter. The house was packed. I recognized the faces. There were city council members, partners from my father's law firm, and half of the board from the charity foundations my grandmother had founded. They were drinking vintage champagne that Genevieve had been saving for her 80th birthday, which she never reached. Harper. The voice was boisterous, carrying the false warmth of a salesman closing a deal. I turned to see Tyler approaching. My older brother looked frantic and exhilarated, his cheeks flushed with bourbon and adrenaline. He was the golden boy, the startup genius whose ventures had burned through $4 million of family money in 6 years without producing a single profitable quarter. "I didn't think you would actually come," Tyler said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. His grip was too tight. "Mom is over by the fireplace. We have a surprise for you. A big one." "A surprise?" asked my internal auditor alarms ringing softly. I worked for Cedarbridge Compliance Group. I spent my days hunting for financial discrepancies and regulatory failures. I knew what a lie looked like on a spreadsheet, but I was still learning to catch them on my brother's face. "Tyler, if this is about the seed funding for the crypto project again, the answer is still no." "God, you are such a buzzkill." He laughed, but his eyes didn't match the sound. "No business tonight. Tonight is about family, about the future. Come on. Dad wants us all on the terrace for the countdown. It is almost midnight." He steered me toward the massive French doors that opened onto the wraparound veranda. The house, a sprawling stone estate nestled against the mountains, was built for grand entrances and dramatic exits. The guests were beginning to chant, a low rumble growing louder as the digital clock on the mantel ticked closer to the new year. 10, the crowd shouted. Tyler guided me right up to the threshold. The glass doors were open, letting in a blast of frigid mountain air that cut through my thin dress. 9. Where are Mom and Dad? Asked, looking around. I thought they wanted us together. They are right there, Tyler said, pointing out into the darkness of the patio. Go save us a spot by the railing. The fireworks from the country club look best from the edge. 8. I stepped out. The cold hit me like a physical blow. Instantly numbing my bare arms, I took 3 steps toward the stone railing, looking for my parents. The patio was empty. A dusting of snow swirled across the slate tiles. 7. I turned back, confused. Tyler. There is no one out here. 6. Tyler was standing in the doorway. He wasn't stepping out. He was stepping back. His expression had shifted from manic joy to a flat, sneering resolve. He reached for the handle of the heavy double doors. 5. Tyler, I said, my voice snatching in the wind. What are you doing? 4. He didn't answer. He slammed the door shut. The sound was heavy. Final. A dull thud that vibrated through the soles of my heels. 3. I rushed to the glass, grabbing the brass handle. It wouldn't turn. I heard the distinct mechanical clack of the deadbolt sliding home. It wasn't just the latch. It was the security bolt, the one that could only be engaged from the inside. 2. Inside the warmth of the living room, the crowd was roaring. Streamers popped. People were kissing. I pounded on the glass with the flat of my palm. Tyler, open the door. This isn't funny. 1. Happy New Year. The muffled cheer erupted from inside. Outside. Silence rushed back in, heavy and freezing. I stood there. Done. My breath forming frantic clouds in the air. Through the pane of glass, I saw my parents emerge from the crowd. They walked up to stand beside Tyler. My father, Robert, looked at me with the dispassionate gaze of a judge sentencing a stranger. My mother, Diana, was smiling. She held her phone up. The camera lens pointed directly at my shivering form. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I pulled it out with shaking fingers. A text from Mom. Consequences. Harper. You do not belong here. I stared at the woman who had given birth to me. She raised her champagne flute in a mock toast, her lips moving. I couldn't hear her through the double-pane storm glass, but I knew the shape of the words. Goodbye, darling. A security guard, a burly man I recognized named Davis, who had worked for my grandmother for 10 years, stepped into view on the other side of the glass. He looked uncomfortable, keeping his eyes on the floor, but he followed my father's gesture. He moved to the side door, the only other entrance from the porch, and I heard the secondary locks engage. Then the main door cracked open just an inch. Tyler, I shouted, moving toward it. Stay back, Tyler hissed. He slipped through the gap, closing it behind him, so he was standing with me in the freezing cold. He wasn't wearing a coat either, but the heat of the house was still clinging to him. He held a thick manila envelope in his hand. What is this? I demanded, my teeth beginning to chatter. Let me back in. Tyler. It is 5 degrees out here. It is actually 2 degrees, he corrected smugly. And you can come back in as soon as you sign this? He shoved the envelope against my chest. I took it instinctively. Inside. The papers were clipped and tabbed with yellow sticky notes indicating where to sign. I didn't need to read the fine print to know what they were. I recognized the formatting, a durable power of attorney, and an irrevocable transfer of assets. You want me to sign over my trust? I said, looking up at him. And my voting shares in the Hart Foundation. It is for the family. Harper, Tyler said, crossing his arms. Dad says you are unstable. You have been causing trouble with all your questions about the estate audit. We are just protecting the assets. Sign it. Give me the rights to manage your portion. And you can come inside, have some lobster, and sleep in your warm bed. And if I don't, then you stay out here. He said simply. You chose this path. Harper. You chose to be the enemy when you refused to release the funds for my startup last week. You chose to be difficult when Mom asked you to blind sign those tax documents. We are done asking. I looked at the document. It was a complete surrender. If I signed this, I would be handing over the only leverage I had. The inheritance Genevieve had specifically left me to ensure I couldn't be bullied by them. She had warned me. They will try to strip you, Harper. They will use love. And when that fails, they will use fear. I looked at Tyler. He was 35 years old, but he looked like a petulant child waiting for a toy. No, I said. My voice was quiet, but the cold air made it crisp. What? I said. No. I am not signing anything. I shoved the envelope back at him. Tyler's face contorted. He snatched the envelope, then grabbed the small leather overnight bag I had left near the door when I arrived. He hurled it over the railing. It tumbled down the front steps and landed in a snowbank near the driveway. Fine, he spat. Have it your way. You're a leech, Harper. Parasitic. Ungrateful leech. Get off the property before I have Davis call the police for trespassing. I live here, I shouted, the injustice finally cracking my composure. Grandma left this house to all of us. Read the deed again, Tyler yelled back, stepping inside and preparing to slam the door. Dad is the executive. He says you are out. Enjoy the walk back to Denver. The door slammed. The lock clicked again. I was alone. The shock began to wear off, replaced by the stinging pain of the cold. My fingers were already going numb. I rushed to the edge of the terrace and ran down the stairs to retrieve my bag. I needed my coat. I tore the zipper open. Empty. They had unpacked it. My coat. My scarf. My spare clothes gone. The bag was stuffed with old newspapers. I stood up, hyperventilating. I needed to leave. I needed a car. I pulled out my phone again. The battery was at 12%. The cold was draining it fast. I opened my ride-sharing app and typed in my apartment address in downtown Denver. Requesting ride. Payment declined. I frowned, tapping the screen. I tried my other card. Payment declined. Panic, cold and sharp as the wind, spiked in my chest. I opened my banking app. Face ID recognized me. The dashboard loaded. Checking account $0. Savings account $0. Credit status frozen by administrator. My father. He was on the joint account I had opened in college and never bothered to close. And he had access to my primary routing numbers through the family trust office. He hadn't just locked me out of the house. He had locked me out of my life. He had changed the passwords, drained the liquid cash, and flagged my credit cards for fraud. I was stranded in the mountains, 30 m from home, in a cocktail dress with no money and a dying phone. I walked to the end of the long driveway, my heels sinking into the ice. The gate was closed, but the pedestrian exit was unlatched. I stumbled through it, standing on the side of the dark county road. The wind whipped my hair across my face. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to preserve whatever body heat I had left. I was going to freeze to death. It wasn't a metaphor. If I didn't find shelter in the next 20 minutes, hypothermia would set in. I thought about walking back to the gate and buzzing the intercom, begging them to let me in, begging to sign the papers. That was what they wanted. They were watching from the windows, waiting for me to break. I looked back at the house. It glowed like a lantern in the dark, warm and golden. I hated them. I hated them with a clarity that felt like a new organ growing in my chest. Headlights swept across the snow-covered pines. A vehicle was approaching. It wasn't a taxi. It was a long black town car, sleek and silent, moving with the heavy grace of a predator. It slowed down as it approached the gate, then stopped right beside me. The rear window rolled down. I expected to see one of my father's partners or maybe a neighbor coming late to the party. I prepared to beg for a ride to the nearest gas station. What are you doing standing there? The voice was unmistakable. It was dry, commanding, and had a timbre that could silence a boardroom with a whisper. It was a voice that I had listened to my entire life. A voice that had taught me how to read a balance sheet and how to pour tea. It was also a voice that should not exist. I stared into the dark interior of the car. The woman sitting there wore a charcoal wool coat and a silk scarf tied impeccably around her neck. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe chignon. Her eyes sharp and gray as a winter storm locked onto mine. "Grandma," I whispered. The word felt like smoke in my mouth. Genevieve Hart. The billionaire matriarch we had mourned, eulogized, and buried in the family plot 60 days ago, leaned forward into the light. She looked annoyed. "Not dead." "Well," she said, opening the door from the inside. "Do not just stand there freezing. Harper, get inside." The interior of the town car was hermetically sealed against the wind, smelling of peppermint and old leather. Beside me, the woman, who was supposed to be resting in peace beneath 6 feet of soil and a granite slab, sat with perfect posture, typing something on a tablet. She did not speak immediately, and neither did I. My brain was still trying to bridge the gap between the funeral I had attended 2 months ago and the living, breathing reality next to me. But as the warmth seeped back into my frozen limbs, another feeling began to thaw out, sharper and more painful than the frostbite. It was the realization that my exile on the porch had not been a sudden impulsive act of cruelty. It was the inevitable conclusion to the role I had been cast in since birth. I was the stable one, the dependable one, the one you called when the party was over and someone needed to sweep up the broken glass. In every family drama, there are archetypes. My brother Tyler was the golden child. He was the protagonist of his own delusions. A man who moved through life with the unearned confidence of someone who has never had to pay for a mistake. I was the supporting character, the fixer. I was the one who knew the Wi-Fi passwords, the one who remembered the allergies, the one who drove my mother to her Botox appointments and told my father which tie matched his suit for court. I was the human equivalent of a load-bearing wall essential for the structure to stand, but completely invisible until I cracked. I looked out the tinted window as the car descended the winding mountain road, leaving the lights of Hartwell House behind. I thought about the dynamic that had led me here. It was a slow, creeping poison. Tyler had always been special. When he failed trigonometry in high school, my parents hired a private tutor and blamed the teacher's pedagogy. When I got a B+ in calculus, they asked why I wasn't applying myself. When Tyler crashed his first BMW into a neighbor's fence at 17, my father handled the police and my mother baked cookies for the neighbors. When I got a parking ticket at 22, my father gave me a 20-minute lecture on civic responsibility and deducted the fine for my birthday money. It wasn't that they didn't love me. They loved me the way a carpenter loves a reliable hammer. They loved that I worked. They loved that I didn't break. This dynamic only worsened as we entered adulthood. Tyler became a serial entrepreneur, a title that in our circle usually meant unemployed with capital. First, it was a bespoke sneaker app that failed because he spent the seed money on launch parties instead of developers. Then, it was a gluten-free vodka brand. Then, a drone delivery service for high-end pet supplies. Each time, a venture collapsed. My parents were there with the checkbook and the excuses. "He is a visionary," my mother would say, her voice thick with protective denial. "The market just isn't ready for him." And where did that money come from? It came from the family trust. And when that got tight, they would look at me. "Harper, you are so strong," my father would say, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You have your career. You are stable. Tyler needs a leg up right now. Just this once. We need to shift some of the dividend allocation. You understand, don't you? It is for the family." Just this once became a mantra. It happened when I was 25. It happened when I was 28. It happened last year when Tyler needed bail money for a misunderstanding in IBA. I absorbed the costs. I stepped back. I made myself smaller so Tyler could have more room to fail. The irony was suffocating. I spent my days at Cedarbridge Compliance Group. I was a senior auditor. My entire professional life was dedicated to forensic accounting and regulatory compliance. I could look at a ledger for a Fortune 500 company and spot a ghost employee or a laundered transaction within 10 minutes. I knew how people hid things. I knew that when the numbers didn't add up, it wasn't an error. It was a story someone didn't want to tell. I was respected at Cedarbridge because I was ruthless with data. I didn't trust anyone. I trusted the math. But when I walked through the front door of my parents' house, I took off my auditor's glasses and put on my blindfold. I let them weaponize my competence against me because I wanted them to be proud of me. I ignored the red flags I would have fired a client for missing. I managed their personal taxes not because I wanted to, but because it saved them accounting fees. I organized their investment portfolios. I cleaned up the messes, never realizing that by being so good at cleaning, I was encouraging them to make more mess. Genevieve had seen it. I closed my eyes, remembering a conversation from 6 months ago. We were sitting in her sunroom, the one with the view of the flat irons. She was frail then, her skin like parchment paper, but her eyes were as sharp as diamonds. "You're too useful, Harper," she had said, setting down her porcelain cup. "I like being helpful, Grandma," I had replied, arranging her medication for the week. "There is a difference between being helpful and being used," she snapped. "Your father is weak and your mother is vain. And Tyler is a bottomless pit. If you keep pouring yourself into them, you will wake up one day and find you are empty, love too much, and you will be used as a tool. Tools do not get seats at the table, Harper. Tools get put back in the box when the job is done." I had dismissed it as the cynicism of a dying woman. I thought she was just being hard on them. I didn't understand that she was giving me the forecast for the storm that was coming. Then came the death, or what we thought was the death 2 months ago. The call came at 3 o'clock in the morning. A massive stroke, the doctor said. By the time I arrived at the hospital, she was gone. The cremation was handled with suspicious speed, ostensibly per her wishes, though I never saw the addendum to the will that requested it. The funeral was a spectacle. My mother, Diana, played the grieving daughter-in-law to perfection, wearing a veil that was stylishly sheer. She cried at all the right moments, dabbing her eyes while simultaneously directing the caterers to ensure the champagne flutes were topped up. My father, Robert, stood at the podium and spoke about the heavy burden of legacy, his voice cracking as he looked out at the assembled business partners. I didn't cry at the service. I couldn't. I felt like I was watching a play where everyone knew their lines except me. I sat in the front row, stiff and silent, feeling a profound sense of isolation. The only person who had ever really seen me was gone. But the grief didn't stop the machinery of greed. Not even for 24 hours. The very next day, the housekeeping began. That was what my father called it. He invited me into his study, pouring me a glass of scotch I didn't want. "Harper, with mother gone, the estate is in chaos," he said, sighing as if he were carrying the weight of the world. "The tax implications are a nightmare. We need to consolidate. We need to present a united front to the banks and the board of the Hart Foundation. I can help with the audit," I had offered immediately. It was my instinct kicking in. "Problem. I fix it." No. "No. You have your own work at Cedarbridge," he said quickly, waving a hand. "I don't want to burden you with the grunt work. We have hired a firm for that. But I do need your help with the authorization structure. Since you are a beneficiary, your name is on a dozen different older accounts. It is slowing down the probate process. If you could just sign these limited powers of attorney, It would allow me to move funds around to pay the estate taxes without dragging you to the bank every other day. He pushed a stack of papers across the mahogany desk. I looked at them. I saw power of attorney. I saw asset reallocation in my office at Cedar Bridge. I would have flagged this immediately. I would have demanded a paper trail. I would have asked why a consolidation required giving up oversight. But this wasn't a client. This was my dad. This was the man who taught me how to ride a bike. This was the family that was all I had left. You trust me, don't you, Harper? He asked softly. I just want to protect what your grandmother built. I want to make sure Tyler doesn't blow his share. And to do that, I need control of the whole pot for a few months, just until the dust settles. He played the Tyler card. He knew I worried about Tyler ruining the family legacy. Tools get put back in the box when the job is done. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a signator. And once I had signed, I was no longer required. The realization hit me in the gut, making me feel nauseous. They didn't kick me out because I was bad. They kicked me out because I was finished. I was a task that had been completed. I was so stupid. I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. I do this for a living. I catch people doing this every single day. And I let them do it to me. The car turned onto the highway, picking up speed. The city lights of Denver were a distant glow on the horizon. Genevieve stopped typing on her tablet. She didn't offer me pity. She didn't reach out to pat my hand. She simply turned her head, her expression unreadable in the shadows. Competence is not a shield against betrayal. Harper, she said, her voice dry as dust. You were not stupid. You were conditioned. They spent 30 years installing the buttons they just pushed. She tapped the screen of her device one more time. A sharp rhythmic sound. But now, she continued, we are going to uninstall them. I looked down at my hands. They were still cold. But they were no longer shaking. The sadness was evaporating, burned away by the heat of a new unfamiliar anger. I had spent my life being the stable one, the one who kept the peace. But peace was over. I was done fixing things. It was time to break them. The town car glided through the dark, but my mind was rewinding, pulling apart the last 60 days like a forensic accountant stripping down a fraudulent ledger. Sitting there in the silence, with the grandmother I thought I had buried, breathing quietly beside me, the pieces of the puzzle finally clicked into a horrifying picture. I had been looking for a mistake, but I should have been looking for a design. The trap had not been sprung tonight on the porch. The trap had been laid the moment the final shovel of dirt hit Genevieve's casket. It started with the paperwork. It always starts with the paperwork. 3 days after the funeral, the air in my parents' house had been thick with the cloying scent of sympathy flowers and unspoken tension. My father, Robert, had called me into the library. He looked haggard. His tie loosened. Piles of documents scattered across the heavy oak desk like debris from a shipwreck. It is a mess, Harper, he had said, rubbing his temples. Your grandmother's estate planning was brilliant for the 90s, but with the current tax laws, it is a minefield. We are looking at a 40% hit on the inheritance tax if we do not restructure immediately. I sat across from him, my auditor's brain instinctively waking up. Do you want me to look at the trust structure? I asked. I can run a simulation on the tax liability. No. No, he said quickly, sliding a stack of folders toward me. The firm is handling the macro strategy. I just need you to help us clear the brush. There are these legacy accounts, joint holdings from when you were a minor, some co-signed bonds. We need to consolidate everything into the main holding company to shield it. I need you to sign these waivers. I looked at the documents. Waiver of accounting. Consent to transfer. In my professional life, if a client presented me with a waiver of accounting, I would have told them to fire their lawyer and call the police. It is a document that essentially says, I do not need to know where the money went. I trust you completely. But looking at my father, seeing the genuine exhaustion in his eyes, I did not see a man trying to embezzle from his daughter. I saw a grieving son trying to save his family from the IRS. Okay, I said, if it helps. I signed away my right to ask questions about the initial distribution. That was the first domino. Then came Tyler. 2 weeks later. My brother cornered me in the kitchen while I was making coffee. He was wearing a suit, which was usually a bad sign. Harper, I need a favor. He started, leaning against the counter. But not money. I swear. I am not asking for a cent. Then what is it? Asked, stirring milk into my cup. Credibility. He said. The new startup. The logistics platform. We have a venture capital firm in San Francisco. Interested big players. But they are worried about the volatility of my previous ventures. They want a guarantor. Not for the cash. But for the character. He slid a document across the granite island. It was a guarantee of performance agreement. If you sign this as equity, Tyler explained, his eyes wide and pleading. It just tells them that someone with a pristine credit rating and a serious job at Cedarbridge vouches for me. It is symbolic. Harper. It is just a vote of confidence on paper. I read the text. It was dense legalese. It stated that the guarantor acknowledged the viability of the principal's business plan. It looked standard. But there was a clause on the second page regarding collateralization of future interests. Tyler. This links my assets to your liability. I warned. If you default, this doesn't just hurt your credit. Comes after me. I am not going to default, he shouted. Then lowered his voice, looking hurt. God, why do you always assume I will fail? Dad believes in this. Mom believes in this. They already signed off on the initial round. I just need you to be the bridge. Just this once. Harper. Be my sister. Not an auditor. Be my sister. The ultimate guilt trip. I looked at his face, seeing the little brother I used to protect from bullies on the playground. I wanted him to win. I wanted him to stop being the family screw-up so I could stop being the family crutch. Fine. I sighed. But I want to see the quarterly reports. Every single one. You are the best. He beamed, hugging me. You won't regret this. I signed. The unease didn't start until early December. I was at my apartment going through my own monthly expenses. I am meticulous about my finances. I track every penny. I logged into the family portal, a shared digital dashboard my father had set up for transparency to check a reimbursement for the funeral catering I had paid for on my personal card. That was when I saw the transaction codes on the secondary family ledger. There were 4 charges, each for $12,500 billed to HP Consulting. The merchant category code was listed as professional services legal. I frowned. The family lawyer was a man named Arthur Sterling. His firm billed as Sterling Moss, who was HP Consulting. I dug deeper. I found more charges. A monthly retainer of $4,000 going to a property management firm in the Cayman Islands. A purchase of $25,000 for office equipment that was processed at a luxury watch dealership in Miami. My heart began to hammer a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. These weren't tax restructuring costs. These were lifestyle expenses being buried under vague headers. I drove to my parents' house that Sunday for dinner. I waited until dessert, trying to keep my voice casual. Hey, Dad, I said, poking at my apple pie. I was looking at the ledger to find the catering receipt. Who is HP Consulting? We have paid them $50,000 in the last month. The silence at the table was immediate. My mother, Diana, set down her fork. The clink of silver against china sounded like a gunshot. Why are you digging through the archives, Harper? She asked, her voice tight. I wasn't digging, I said defensively. I was just looking for my reimbursement. But those codes look weird in the Miami charge. Did we buy office equipment from a watch store? It is a holding company, my father said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. He didn't look at me. Complex assets require complex management. HP handles the offshore compliance for the grandmother's charitable trust. It is above board. But the watch store? I pressed. It was a gift for the lead counsel. Tyler interjected, his mouth full of pie. You have to grease the wheels. Harper. You know how business works. $25,000 of grease? I asked. That is not compliance. Tyler. That is embezzlement. Enough. My mother slammed her hand on the table. My God. Harper. It is the holidays. We are still grieving your grandmother. We are trying to keep this family afloat. And you come in here acting like an IRS agent. Can we not have one dinner without you interrogating us? I'm just asking. You are accusing, my father said, his voice cold. We are handling it. Stop looking for problems where there aren't any. You are stressing your mother out. I shut up. I backed down. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe rich families did buy 5-figure watches for lawyers. Maybe I was just too rigid. But the seed of doubt had taken root. 3 days before New Year's Eve, I did something I should have done weeks earlier. I ran a full credit check on myself. Not the cursory glance I usually gave my score, but a full pull from all 3 bureaus. I sat in my office at Cedarbridge, the glow of the monitors illuminating the dark room. I waited for the report to generate, sipping lukewarm water. When the PDF loaded, I felt the blood drain from my face. There, listed under open installment loans, was a line item I had never seen. Lender West Creek Private Equity. Origination date November 15th. Principal balance $250,000. Cosigner Robert Lawson. I stared at the screen. I had never taken out a loan for $250,000. I clicked on the details. The loan was secured against my future interest in the Hartwell estate. It was a bridge loan. High interest. Short term. My father had used my identity. He had used the power of attorney documents I signed for the tax restructuring to open a massive line of credit in my name, effectively borrowing against my inheritance before I had even received it. I grabbed my phone and dialed Arthur Sterling, the family lawyer. I needed to know if this was legal. I needed to know if I could stop it. I'm sorry, the receptionist said, her voice polished and dismissive. Mr. Sterling is out of the office for the holidays. This is an emergency. I insisted. I need to speak to him. My father has opened a loan in my name. Mr. Sterling represents the executive of the estate. Lawson. The receptionist said. Ethically. He cannot advise you if your interests are in conflict with the executive. You should seek independent counsel. Conflict with the executive. The words hit me like a physical slap. The executive was my father. The family lawyer wasn't our lawyer. He was his lawyer. I tried to hire my own attorney that afternoon, but it was December 29th. No one was taking new cases until after the new year. I was alone, staring at a debt that could bankrupt me with no legal shield. Then the text came from my mother. Please come home for New Year's Eve. We need to talk. We want to make everything right. I sat in my apartment, oscillating between rage and desperation. Part of me knew it was a trap, but another part of me, the part that was still a frightened daughter, hoped it was an apology. Maybe they had realized they went too far. Maybe they wanted to explain. Maybe if I went there and confronted them face to face, my father would fix it. He had always fixed things before. They want to talk. I had whispered to my empty living room. I will go. I will demand they pay off the loan and release me from Tyler's guarantee. I will make them sign a contract. So, I put on the navy dress. I drove to Boulder. I walked up the steps to Hartwell House with a folder of evidence tucked into my bag, thinking I was walking into a negotiation. I was wrong. I wasn't walking into a negotiation. I was walking into a sentencing hearing where the verdict had already been decided. They didn't want to explain the loan. They wanted to legitimize it. The papers Tyler had tried to force me to sign on the porch weren't just about managing assets. I realized now as the car sped through the night what they really were. They were retroactive authorizations. If I had signed those documents tonight, I would have legally validated the fraud they had already committed. I would have absolved them of the theft and accepted the debt as my own. They invited me to a party to bury me. "You are grinding your teeth," Genevieve said. Breaking the silence, I jolted back to the present. The anger was no longer a cold knot. It was a blazing fire. I looked at my grandmother. "They stole my identity," I said, my voice trembling with fury. "Dad took out a $250,000 loan in my name. Tyler used me to guarantee a startup that is probably a shell company. Mom knew. They all knew." Genevieve nodded slowly. They knew. Greed is a group activity in this family. "Why?" I asked. "Why me? I am the one who helps them. I am the one who keeps their secrets. Because you were the only one with anything left to steal," Genevieve said brutally. "Your father is leveraged to his eyeballs. The firm is quiet. Tyler has drained his trust. You, Harper, with your savings and your clean credit and your naive loyalty, you were the last liquidity event available." She handed me a thick file folder she had pulled from the leather seat pocket. "Open it," she commanded. I opened the folder. It wasn't empty like the one Tyler had tried to give me. It was full of bank transfers, surveillance photo, and emails. "I have been watching them since the day I died," Genevieve said. "I knew they would turn on you. I just needed to wait until they committed a crime that was undeniable tonight, when they locked you out and tried to coerce a signature under duress. That was the final element required for a criminal conspiracy charge." She smiled. But it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf who had finally cornered the hunters. "You came there hoping for a family," she said. "You left with a case file. Now, wipe your face. We have work to do before the sun comes up." The hour leading up to midnight was not a party. It was a choreographed suffocation. I had walked into Hartwell House with my folder of evidence pressed against my side, a naive shield against the artillery my family had assembled. I thought I could corner my father in the study or pull my mother aside in the kitchen. I thought we would have a screaming match, perhaps some tears, and then a resolution. I was prepared for a fight. I was not prepared for a stage play. The living room was a sea of cashmere and silk. My parents had curated the guest list with surgical precision. These were not just friends. They were witnesses. Or rather, they were a jury that had been tampered with before the trial even began. I recognized the vice president of the regional bank that held the family's primary accounts. I saw 3 board members from the Hart Foundation, men who owed their careers to my grandmother, but were now drinking my father's scotch, and scattered like sharks in a reef where the venture capitalist Tyler was trying to court for his new logistics startup. Men with perfect teeth and eyes that assessed the room for weakness. "Harper, you made it." My mother, Diana, floated toward me before I could even take off my coat. She was wearing a silver gown that shimmered like fish scales. Her smile was bright, rigid, and did not reach her eyes. She gripped my upper arm, her fingers digging into the soft flesh. "Smile," she hissed through her teeth while waving at a passing couple. "The CEO of Frontier Tech is watching. Do not look so sour. We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice low. "I saw the credit report. Mom, I know about the loan." "Not now," she breezed, steering me forcefully toward the periphery of the room. "Tonight is about celebration. Tonight is about Tyler's big announcement. Do not ruin this for him." She deposited me at a small high-top table near the kitchen doors. This was my designated spot. In the geography of the party, the center of the room was for the power players, my father holding court by the fireplace, Tyler charming the investors near the bar. The windows were for the social climbers, and I was placed in the service corridor, visible enough to prove the family was united, but far enough away that my voice would not carry. A waiter I did not recognize placed a glass of champagne in my hand. I set it down. I needed a clear head. I watched them work the room. It was impressive in a grotesque way. My father was the picture of the benevolent patriarch, laughing at jokes he didn't find funny, shaking hands with the bankers who were likely approving the very transfers I was trying to stop. My mother was the gracious hostess, spinning a narrative of resilience and family unity. And Tyler was in his element. He was manic, moving from group to group, pointing at architectural features of the house as if he had built them himself. At 11:30, Tyler finally made his way to my exile corner. He held a crystal tumbler of bourbon in one hand and a thin leather portfolio in the other. "Hey, sis," he said, leaning against the table. He smelled of expensive cologne and desperation. "Great turnout, right? Those guys from San Francisco. They are ready to commit. I just need to show them the finalized capitalization table. I am not signing the guarantee, Tyler," I said, cutting straight to the point. "Relax." He laughed, but his eyes darted around the room to make sure no one was listening. We changed the terms. Dad and I talked. We took the liability clause out. This is just a standard voting proxy. It lets me represent your shares at the board meeting next week, so you do not have to fly back from Denver. He opened the portfolio and slid a single sheet of paper onto the table, covering the text with his hand, leaving only the signature line exposed. "Just sign here," he said, producing a gold blank pen. "Takes 2 seconds. Then you can go eat some shrimp and relax." I reached out and moved his hand. The header did not say voting proxy. It said assignment of beneficial interest. The Hart Foundation. I looked up at him, my stomach dropping. This wasn't just about his startup. This was about the charitable foundation my grandmother had endowed with $50 million. "Tyler," I said, my voice rising slightly, "this transfers my administrative rights over the charity funds to you. This lets you liquidate the principal. It is for investment purposes." His face flushing red. "We are going to grow the fund. You are so short-sighted, Harper. You sit in your cubicle counting pennies while I am trying to build an empire. You are trying to loot the charity to fund your company." I stated flatly, "I am not signing this." Tyler snatched the paper back, his veneer of brotherly love cracking. "You are going to sign it, Dad." He waved across the room. My father excused himself from a conversation with a senator's wife and walked over. His face was a mask of calm, but I could see the vein pulsing in his temple. "Is there a problem?" Robert asked, stepping between us and the rest of the party to block the view. "She is being difficult," Tyler spat. "She is reading the fine print again." "Harper," my father said, his voice dropping to that deep, resonant baritone he used to intimidate junior associates. "We discussed this. We need a united front. The investors need to see that the family assets are consolidated under active management. Your hesitation is making us look weak." "My hesitation is because you committed fraud," I whispered furiously. "You took out $250,000 in my name, Dad. And now you want me to hand over the foundation money. Is that how you're going to pay back the loan by robbing Grandma's charity?" My father's face went cold. He grabbed my elbow, his grip painful, and marched me backward into the small alcove leading to the servants' pantry. We were out of sight, but the noise of the party, the clinking glasses, the jazz band playing a frenetic cover of Old Lang was deafening. "You will lower your voice," he commanded. "Do not speak to me about fraud. I am the executive. I have broad discretion to manage this estate as I see fit. I am trying to save this family from tax ruin. And you are acting like a petulant child. I want to see the full file. I demanded, shaking his hand off. I want to see the loan documents, the trust addendum, and the full text of what Tyler just tried to make me sign right now. No, he said simply. Then I am leaving. I said, and tomorrow morning I am going to the district attorney. My father laughed. It was a short, dry sound. You think anyone will listen to you? The hysterical daughter who was cut out of the will for being unstable. We have already laid the groundwork. Harper. Everyone in that room thinks you're having a breakdown. Why do you think you're sitting in the corner? My mother appeared at my other side, completing the encirclement. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed, which was her favorite weapon. Harper, please, she pleaded, touching my cheek with a hand that felt like ice. Don't do this. Not tonight. Look at your brother. He is so close to success. If you cause a scene, if you scare these investors away, you will destroy him. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be the reason this family fails? I am not the reason, I said, tears of frustration pricking my eyes. You are gaslighting me. You are using me. We are protecting you, she insisted, her voice rising in a pitch perfect for the nearby guests to hear. Oh, Harper. Why can you never just be happy for us? Why must everything be a battle? She turned to the nearest group of guests, the bank VP and his wife, and offered a tragic, long-suffering smile. I am so sorry. My daughter is having a bit of a moment. She has been under so much stress since mother passed. The guests nodded sympathetically, looking at me with pity. Poor thing. Their eyes said, clearly unstable. I am not unstable, I said louder than I intended. My father signaled to the band leader. The music swelled. The brass section kicked into a high-tempo swing number, drowning out my voice. You have two choices, my father said, leaning close to my ear so only I could hear him over the trumpets. You sign the papers Tyler has. You surrender your voting rights and we forgive the loan. We pay it off and your credit is clean. You can go back to your little job and pretend none of this happened. And the second choice? Asked, trembling. Or you go outside, he said. And you stay there. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 11:58 at night. I want to read the papers, I said, clinging to my last shred of professional dignity. If everything is legal, let me read them. There is no time, Tyler said, peering with the envelope again. It is midnight. Harper. Sign or get out. I looked at the three of them. My father. The architect. My mother. The enabler. My brother. The parasite. They were not asking for my help. They were demanding my submission. They wanted me to be an accessory to my own destruction. No, I said. The word was small, lost in the crescendo of the music, but they heard it. My father's face went blank. He nodded once to someone behind me. I turned to see Davis, the head of security, standing 2 feet away. He wasn't smiling. He had his earpiece in and his hands clasped in front of him. M. Lawson, Davis said, his voice heavy with apology, but firm with duty. Mr. Lawson has asked that you be escorted from the premises. But it is midnight, I stammered. It is freezing. This way. Please, Davis said, taking my arm. He didn't drag me, but the pressure was undeniable. He was guiding me toward the terrace doors. Wait, I said, looking back at my mother. Mom. Diana turned her back to me. She lifted her champagne flute, joining the crowd that was beginning the final countdown. 10. The room shouted in unison. Davis pushed the French doors open. The cold air rushed in, biting and violent. Please, I said to my father. Dad, don't do this. Robert looked at me with eyes that were entirely void of affection. You chose this. Harper. 8. Davis guided me over the threshold. The transition was brutal from the golden heat of the party to the Arctic bite of the Colorado winter. 7. I stumbled onto the stone patio. I turned around intending to argue, to fight, to scream. 6. Tyler was there. He stood in the doorway, framed by the warmth and the light. He looked at me with pure contempt. 5. You should have just signed, he mouthed. 4. He reached for the handles of the heavy glass doors. 3. Tyler. No. I lunged forward. 2. The doors slammed shut. 1 Happy New Year. The sound was muffled, distant, like a celebration happening underwater. I was on the outside. The script had been executed perfectly. I had been staged, managed, and discarded. I watched the fireworks reflect in the glass, exploding over a family that had just successfully surgically removed its conscience. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home was not loud, but it vibrated through the soles of my shoes like a judge's gavel hitting the bench. Inside, the world was a kaleidoscope of gold streamers and crystal flutes raised in jubilation. Outside, the world was a vacuum of freezing darkness. Immediately, the sky above the flat irons erupted. Boom. Boom. Crack. Fireworks from the Boulder Country Club painted the night in spasms of red and green. The noise was deafening, a percussive assault that seemed to mock the silence of my exclusion. I stood 3 in from the glass, my breath already fogging the pain. I could see them. I could see the back of my father's tuxedo jacket as he hugged a partner from the firm. I could see my mother laughing, her head thrown back, her neck exposed, completely unburdened by the fact that her daughter was standing in sub-zero temperatures wearing nothing but a cocktail dress. I grabbed the brass handle and rattled it. It was solid, immovable. Open the door, I shouted. But the sound was snatched away by the wind. I pounded on the glass with the flat of my hand, the impact sending a shock of pain up my frozen wrist. Dad, open this door. Davis, the security guard who had walked me out, did not move away. He stood on the other side of the glass, his arms crossed over his chest. He looked at me with a flat professional pity that was worse than hatred. He held up a hand, palm out, signaling. Stop. I could read his lips perfectly. Orders. Miss Harper. It was not a mistake. It was not a prank. It was a tactical eviction. The cold began to register not as temperature, but as violence. The air in the mountains at midnight was sharp enough to cut skin. It bit into my bare arms, my exposed throat, the thin fabric of my navy dress. My muscles seized up instantly, contracting in a primitive attempt to generate heat. I hugged myself, my teeth chattering so hard I bit my tongue. Then the latch clicked. Hope surged through me, hot and desperate. I stepped forward, reaching for the door, thinking my father had come to his senses. The door opened 6 in, just enough to let a slice of warmth and the smell of roasting lamb spill out onto the patio. But it wasn't my father. It was Tyler. He stood in the gap, blocking the heat with his body. He held the manila envelope in one hand and a glass of bourbon in the other. He took a sip, the ice cubes clinking softly, watching me shiver. It is chilly out there, he observed, his voice casual, as if commenting on the weather report. Tyler. Let me in, I stammered, my jaw tight. I am freezing. I can't feel my fingers. It is an easy fix. Harper, he said. waving the envelope through the crack in the door. The pen is right here. Sign the transfer. Grant me the voting proxy for the foundation. Sign the retroactive approval for the loan Dad took out. Do that and you can come inside. You can sit by the fire. I will even pour you a drink. I stared at him. The amber liquid in his glass caught the light from the chandelier behind him. He was leveraging my physical safety against my legal compliance. It was extortion in its purest form. You are blackmailing me, I whispered. I am negotiating. He corrected. You have something I want your signature. I have something you want. Warmth. It is basic supply and demand. You are the economist. Harper. You should understand this. I will sue you, I said, though my voice lacked force because my diaphragm was spasming from the cold. I will sue you for everything. Tyler sighed, looking bored. Sign. And you are family. Don't sign. And well? Happy New Year. Enjoy the fresh air. He tossed something onto the patio tiles. It landed with a heavy thud near my feet. It was my overnight bag, the leather carry-on I had brought with me, assuming I would be staying in my old room. Mom packed it for you, Tyler said. She is very efficient. Tyler. He stepped back. Tick-tock. Harper. Hypothermia sets in pretty fast at this elevation. He slammed the door. This time I heard the secondary lock engage the heavy security bolt that barred entry even with a key. I was alone. I stared at the closed door for 10 seconds, waiting for the joke to end. It didn't. Inside. The party continued. I saw my mother pause near the window. She looked out, her eyes scanning the darkness. For a fleeting second, our gazes locked. I pleaded with her, silently begging her to be a mother first and a conspirator second. She looked at my shivering form, then raised her glass in a small, almost imperceptible toast, and turned her back. She had chosen. I scrambled for my bag, my fingers clumsy and numb. I needed my coat. I needed layers. I unzipped the main compartment, praying for my wool trench coat. It was empty of clothes. Instead, the bag was stuffed with newspapers, old editions of the Wall Street Journal and the Denver Post. My clothes were gone. My toiletries were gone. I dug frantically to the bottom. Nothing. Just crumpled paper. They hadn't just kicked me out. They had stripped me. It was a message. You have nothing unless we give it to you. Panic. Cold and sharp. Finally overtook the shock. I needed to leave. I needed to get down the mountain before I froze to death. I grabbed my phone from my clutch. The metal case burned my fingers. Battery 12%. I tapped the banking app icon. I needed to call a car. I needed to book a hotel room in Boulder. I needed to know I had resources. The app opened. Face ID scanned my freezing face. Access denied. I blinked, wiping a snowflake from my eyelashes. I tried again. Access denied. Account locked by administrator. I dialed the priority banking number, my fingers shaking so badly I hit the wrong digit twice. I put the phone to my ear, pacing in small circles on the icy patio to keep my blood moving. Welcome to First National Private Client Services. The automated voice chirped. Please enter your access PIN. I punched in the code I had used for 10 years. I am sorry, that PIN is invalid. No. I gasped. No. 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 I hit 0. I hit it again and again. Representative. Representative. Please hold for the next available agent. The hold music started. A light jazz piano that sounded horrifyingly similar to the band playing inside the house. I stood there, trapped between the glass and the void, listening to a saxophone solo while my body temperature dropped. Security department. This is Mark. A human voice finally said. Mark, I said. my voice slurring slightly from the cold. This is Harper Lawson. My account is locked. I am stranded. I need you to unlock it immediately. One moment. Lawson. Mark said. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. Ah. I see the note here. The primary account holder placed a security freeze on all sub-accounts at 4 o'clock this afternoon, due to suspected compromise. I am the account holder. I screamed. It is my money. Actually, ma'am, this is a family trust structure. Mark explained calmly. Your father, Robert Lawson, is the administrator. He flagged your cards in the checking account. He reported that your credentials might have been stolen. He is lying. I shouted. He is trying to force me to sign a contract. You have to let me access my funds. I cannot do that without the administrator's verbal authorization code. Mark said. It is for your protection. Lawson. For my protection. I laughed. A hysterical jagged sound. I am freezing to death. He is doing this to hurt me. I advise you to contact Mr. Lawson directly, Mark said. Is there anything else I can help you with? I hung up. The screen went black. 7% battery left. I understood now. The architecture of the trap was flawless. They hadn't just locked the doors to the house. They had locked the doors to my existence. Without that money, without my credit cards, without my legal identity, I was nothing. I couldn't hire a lawyer. I couldn't rent a room. I couldn't even buy a cup of coffee to warm my hands. They wanted to break my legal personhood. They wanted to reduce me to a terrified child who had no choice but to crawl back to the door, knock politely, and sign whatever they put in front of me just to survive. I looked at the house. It glowed like a warm golden lantern. It was the only source of heat for miles. My body was beginning to betray me. The shivering was becoming violent. Uncontrollable spasms that racked my shoulders and spine. My feet encased in 3 inches heels felt like blocks of wood. I couldn't feel my toes anymore. I had 2 choices. Choice 1. Knock on the door. Surrender. Sign the papers. Give Tyler the charity money. Accept the debt. Let them win. If I did that, I would be warm in 5 minutes. Choice 2. Walk. I looked down the driveway. It was a /4 mile long, winding through the pine trees to the main road. It was pitch black. The wind was howling down the canyon. I will not sign, I said to the wind. I turned away from the house. I grabbed the handle of my empty suitcase, my only possession, and began to walk. The first step was agony. The heel of my shoes slipped on the ice, and I almost went down. I caught myself gasping. I forced myself to take another step, then another. I made it to the edge of the terrace. I walked down the stone stairs. The snow was ankle-deep here. It seeped into my shoes instantly, burning like acid. I trudged down the driveway. The lights of the house faded behind me. The darkness was total. The wind whipped my hair across my face, blinding me. I was crying, but the tears froze on my cheeks before they could fall. I walked for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 10 minutes. My body was shutting down. My thoughts were becoming sluggish. Just sit down. A voice in my head whispered. Just sit in the snow for a minute. It is not that cold. I knew that voice. That was the voice of hypothermia. That was the end. I reached the main gate. It was closed. A towering iron barrier. I squeezed through the pedestrian gap, stumbling out onto the county road. There was nothing here. No street lights. No cars. Just the looming silhouette of the mountains and the endless biting wind. I collapsed. My legs simply gave out. I fell onto the frozen asphalt, my knees cracking against the ground. I curled into a ball, pulling the empty suitcase against my chest as a shield against the wind. It was pathetic. I was a 33-year-old woman, a senior compliance officer, a homeowner. And I was going to die on the side of a road because my family wanted more money. I closed my eyes. The cold didn't hurt as much anymore. Felt heavy. Like a weighted blanket. So, this is it. I thought. They win. Then light. It started as a faint glow against my eyelids, then grew brighter, piercing through the darkness. I heard the crunch of tires on snow, the hum of an engine. I forced my eyes open. Twin beams of white light cut through the swirling snow. A car was slowing down. I tried to wave, but my arm wouldn't lift. I was a statue made of ice. The car stopped. It was a black sedan, long and expensive, looking like a hearse that had taken a wrong turn. The engine idled softly. A deep, powerful purr. The rear door opened. A figure stepped out. A woman. She didn't run. She didn't rush. She moved with a terrifying, deliberate calm. She walked toward me, her shoes clicking on the asphalt. She stopped and looked down at me. I looked up, my vision blurring. "Grandma," I whispered, my brain firing its last confused neurons. Genevieve Hart. The woman whose ashes were sitting in an urn on my father's mantel, looked down at me with eyes that were very much alive and blazing with a cold fury that made the winter storm feel like a summer breeze. "Get in the car, Harper," she said. "We have work to do." The black sedan did not look like a rescue vehicle. It looked like a weapon. It sat idling on the frozen county road, the exhaust pluming into the night air like dragon smoke. The back door was open and the woman standing there was not a ghost. Ghosts are translucent, wavering things born of grief and bad lighting. Genevieve Hart was solid. She was terrifyingly, undeniably high definition. She wore a charcoal wool coat that grazed her ankles, cut with the kind of military precision that costs more than most people earn in a year. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe chignon, not a single strand out of place despite the wind that was currently freezing the tears on my face. "Grandma," I choked out again, my voice cracking. She stepped toward me. Her movement was fluid, sharp, and commanding. She looked at me lying in the snow, curled around my empty suitcase, shivering so violently that my teeth were making a clicking sound. She did not gasp. She did not cry. She looked at me with the clinical assessing gaze of a CEO inspecting a damaged asset. "Look at you," she said. Her voice was not a whisper from the grave. It was the same steel-edged alto that had terrified board members for 4 decades. "Get up, Harper." "I can't," I stammered. "My legs," she snapped her fingers. Edward, the driver, a mountain of a man in a black suit, materialized from the front seat. He didn't say a word. He scooped me up off the asphalt as if I weighed nothing more than a wet towel and deposited me into the back seat of the car. Genevieve followed, pulling the door shut. The silence inside was absolute. The heat was set to 75 degrees. I gasped, the warmth stinging my frozen skin like needles. "Drink this," Genevieve said, handing me a thermos cup. I took it with shaking hands. It was hot tea, heavily sweetened. I drank it, staring at her over the rim. She was sitting next to me. I could smell her perfume, Chanel No. 5, and cold cash. "I went to your funeral," I whispered, the reality of the situation wearing with my confusion. "I saw the casket. I saw the ashes." "You saw a closed casket and a heavy urn," she corrected, tapping on her tablet. "And you saw a performance." I needed to know who would mourn me and who would start measuring the drapes. I got my answer in less than 24 hours. "You faked your death?" asked, my brain struggling to process the enormity of the lie. "I took a sabbatical," she said dryly. "My doctors and I agreed that the stress of watching my son run my legacy into the ground was going to kill me eventually. So I decided to die strategically rather than biologically. It is amazing what people say when they think no one is listening." She looked at me, then really looked at me. Her eyes narrowed as she took in my lack of a coat, my blue lips, and the empty suitcase on the floorboard. They kicked you out, she stated. It wasn't a question. Midnight, I said. Tyler, Mom, Dad, they wanted me to sign over the foundation voting rights. They wanted me to validate a fraudulent loan Dad took out in my name. When I refused, they put me on the street. Genevieve's jaw tightened. A muscle jumped in her cheek. It was the only sign of emotion she allowed herself, but it was enough to make the air in the car feel charged with electricity. Edward, she said to the driver, take us to the house. Grandma. No, I said, panic flaring again. They locked the gate. They have security. Davis is there. Davis works for me, she said. He just forgot who signs the checks. And as for the gate, she picked up her phone and dialed a number. Now she hung up. The car made a U-turn and accelerated up the driveway. We approached the massive iron gates. They were closed. But as the headlights hit them, they began to swing open. Who opened them? I asked. My forensic accountants, she said calmly. They have been in the server room of the security company for the last 10 minutes. We have retaken digital control of the estate. We swept up the long winding drive. Through the trees. I could see Hartwell House blazing with light. The party was still in full swing. They were celebrating. They were drinking champagne and toasting to the new year. Confident that the problem named Harper had been disposed of, the car pulled up to the main portico, right to the spot where Tyler had thrown my bag 30 minutes ago. Stay here for a moment, Genevieve said. Wrap yourself in the blanket. She pointed to a cashmere throw folded on the seat. I grabbed it. Huddling into the corner, Genevieve opened her door. The arrival of a strange black car right at the front steps had drawn attention. I saw Davis, the security guard, step out from the shadows. He looked annoyed, ready to tell a lost driver to turn around. He saw the woman step out of the car. I watched Davis's face through the tinted glass. It went slack. His skin turned the color of old paste. He took a step back, his hand falling away from his radio. He crossed himself. The front door opened. My father, Robert, stepped out. He was holding a glass of wine, looking irritated. Davis, what is going on out here? He shouted. Who is this? Tell them to leave immediately or I will have them towed. Genevieve stepped into the circle of light cast by the porch lanterns. She stood tall, her coat billowing slightly in the wind. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Hello, Robert, she said. My father dropped his glass. It shattered on the stone. Red wine splashing onto his tuxedo shoes like blood. He didn't move. He couldn't move. He stared at his mother as if the gates of hell had opened up on his front lawn. Mother, he choked out. Genevieve. My mother's voice came from the doorway. Diana stepped out, wrapping a fur stole around her shoulders. She looked at the woman standing by the car. Her knees buckled. She actually grabbed the door frame to keep from collapsing. It is a ghost, she whispered. It is a ghost. I am not a ghost, Diana, Genevieve said, her voice cutting through the wind. I am the landlord. By now, the guests inside had noticed the commotion. People were crowding the doorway, peering out over my parents' shoulders. The music had stopped. A hush fell over the crowd that was heavier than the snow. Tyler pushed his way through the guests. What is the problem? Why is the door open? He stopped. He saw her. Grandma, he said, his face draining of color. Then his eyes darted to the car. He looked at the license plate. He looked at the driver. His survival instinct kicked in, the same instinct that made him a liar. It is a trick, Tyler shouted, pointing at her. It is a deep fake or a look-alike. Harper hired someone. It is a stunt. Genevieve didn't even look at him. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She held it up. I have the Boulder Police Department, the district attorney, and the senior partners of Hawthorne and Pierce on a conference line. She announced to the silent crowd. They are listening to everything. She walked up the steps. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. My father and mother shrank back, terrified to touch her, terrified she might be cold to the touch. She stopped in front of them. She looked at the shattered wine glass. She looked at the closed door. Where is my granddaughter? She asked. She left. My father stammered. She wanted to go home. We called her a cab. Liar, Genevieve said. The word was soft, but it hit him like a slap. I found her in a snowbank a mile from here, freezing to death because you locked her out. She turned to the guests. These were the elite of Colorado society. They were staring with their mouths open. I apologize for the interruption, Genevieve said, her voice projecting effortlessly, but it appears my death was an administrative error. However, the theft and extortion occurring in my house tonight was not an error. It was a crime. Mother. Please. My father hissed, looking around at the bankers and investors. Not in front of everyone. Let's go inside. We can explain. You are confused. I have never been less confused in my life. Robert, she said. She turned back to the car and beckoned. I opened the door. I stepped out wrapped in the cashmere blanket, still shivering. My makeup ruined. My hair a mess. I walked up the steps to stand beside her. The guests gasped. They saw the blue tint of my lips. They saw the terror in my eyes. Harper. My mother cried out, trying to switch roles instantly. Oh my God. Honey. Where did you go? We were so worried. We thought you were in the bathroom. Stop it, I said. My voice was raspy. Just stop lying. Mom. You watched me from the window. She is delirious. Tyler yelled. She is having an episode. Grandma, listen to me. Harper has been unstable since the funeral. She came here tonight making threats. She attacked us. Genevieve raised one hand, palm open, fingers spread. It was a gesture of absolute command. Tyler shut his mouth instantly. Open the door. Genevieve said to my father, we are going inside to sign some papers. Real papers. Not the fraudulent trash you tried to force on this girl. My father stood frozen. He looked at the heavy oak door. He looked at his keys. He started to sweat despite the freezing temperature. I can't. He whispered. Why not? Genevieve asked. It is my house. You have the key. I don't. He admitted, his voice barely audible. Speak up. She commanded. I changed the locks. My father confessed, looking at his shoes. Yesterday. I changed the master cylinders so the old keys wouldn't work. To secure the property. To keep Harper out. Genevieve finished for him. She looked at him with a disappointment so profound it felt like a physical weight. You changed the locks on your mother's house before the grass had even grown on her grave. You locked your daughter out in a blizzard. She turned to Davis. Davis, she said. Kick it in. Miss Hart. That is solid mahogany, Davis said, looking at the door. I don't care if it is solid gold, she said. Kick it in. Davis didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, wound up, and drove his heel into the lock plate. Crack. The wood splintered. The crowd jumped. He kicked it again. Bang. The door flew open, bouncing off the interior wall. Genevieve stepped over the threshold into the warmth of the house she had built. She turned back to me, extending a hand. Come inside. Harper, she said. It is time to clean house. I took her hand. It was warm. I walked past my father who was trembling. I walked past my mother who was sobbing into her fur. I walked past Tyler who looked like he was trying to calculate an escape route. We entered the foyer. Genevieve stopped in the center of the room. The music was gone. The party was dead. She looked at the guests, then at the family portraits hanging on the wall. Portraits of my father and Tyler. Smiling and confident. "Edward," she said to her driver, who had followed us in with a briefcase. "Hand me the eviction notices." "Eviction?" Tyler squeaked. "Tonight it is New Year's Day." Genevieve smiled. It was the terrifying smile I had seen in the car. "New Year. New management," she said. "You have 1 hour to pack a bag. And Robert," my father looked up, his eyes hollow, "leave the watches," she said. "And the wine. Those belong to the estate. And right now the estate is investigating you for grand larceny." We did not stay at Hartwell House. After the door was kicked in and the eviction notice was verbally served, Genevieve decided the air in that house was too toxic to breathe. She left a team of private security guards to ensure nothing left the premises. No art, no jewelry, and certainly no hard drives, and took me to the St. Julian Hotel in downtown Boulder. We checked into the presidential suite at 2 o'clock in the morning. I was still wearing my shivering cocktail dress wrapped in the cashmere blanket, while the concierge looked at Genevieve with a mixture of awe and terror. She ordered a pot of coffee and a secure router, then sat me down on a velvet sofa. "Why?" I asked, the adrenaline finally crashing into exhaustion. "Why did you let us think you were dead? Why did you let me grieve?" Genevieve poured 2 cups of black coffee. Her hand was steady. "Because I needed to see who would bring flowers to the grave and who would bring a shovel." She took a sip, her eyes dark. 3 months ago, I found my heart medication in the wrong bottle. The pills looked similar, but they were beta blockers, not blood thinners. If I had taken them for a week, I would have stroked out. Could have been a pharmacy error. But then I found the draft of a do not resuscitate order on your father's desk, forged with my signature. I felt the blood drain from my face. They tried to kill you. They tried to accelerate the inevitable. She corrected calmly. So, I removed myself from the board. I went to a private clinic in Zurich under an alias. I let the rumors of a stroke become a confirmed death. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to think the watchdog was gone so they would stop hiding the bones. She reached out and touched my hand. It was the first time she had shown physical affection all night. I knew they would come for the money. "Harper, I did not know they would come for you. For that. I am sorry. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't." The sun rose on January 1st, bathing the flat irons in a cold pink light, while the rest of the world was nursing hangovers and making resolutions they would break by February. The living room of our hotel suite was transformed into a war room. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the door opened. It wasn't room service. It was a team of 4 people carrying laptops and encrypted servers. "This is the audit team," Genevieve said, gesturing to them. "They have been mirroring the Heart Foundation servers for 6 weeks. Today, we open the books." I sat at the mahogany desk, a laptop open in front of me. I was no longer the shivering victim on the porch. I was Harper Lawson, Senior Compliance Officer. I cracked my knuckles and logged into the secure server Genevieve's team had set up. "Show me," I said. The first thing we looked at was the HP consulting firm I had flagged in December. My father had claimed it was for offshore compliance. "Run the routing numbers," I told the analyst sitting next to me. He typed rapidly. "Routing number traces back to a shell entity registered in Delaware. The registered agent is a P.O. box in Wilmington. But look at the secondary beneficiary." He turned the screen toward me. "Beneficiary TL Ventures LLC. Tyler Lawson." I whispered. "It is a pass-through." I said, my brain clicking into high gear. They are moving money from the family trust to HP Consulting for legal fees. Then HP is transferring 90% of it to Tyler's LLC as consulting retainers. They are draining the operating capital of the estate to fund his lifestyle. That is embezzlement, Genevieve said from the sofa where she was reviewing bank statements. But it is messy. Robert is usually more careful. How are they hiding the tax liability? That is where I come in. I realize. Feeling a sick sensation in my stomach. Pull up the loan documents. The ones from November 15th. The analyst pulled up the file. West Creek private equity borrower Harper Lawson. I stared at the PDF. It was a promissory note for $250,000. And there at the bottom was my signature. It was a perfect loop of my H and the sharp cross of the L. I didn't sign this, I said. I was in the office that day. Can you prove it? The analyst asked. Digital signatures are hard to refute unless you have an alibi for the IP address. Check the metadata of the signature. I commanded. What is the timestamp? November 15th. 2:34 in the afternoon. He read. I pulled out my phone and opened my work calendar app. I scrolled back to November 15th. I read aloud. I was conducting an on-site audit for a client in Denver. I was at the tech center. I badged into their building at 8 o'clock in the morning and badged out at 6 o'clock. I looked at the analyst. I was physically 20 m away from the IP address that signed this document. And Cedarburg requires us to leave our personal devices in a locker during secure audits. I didn't even have my phone. So, who signed it? Genevieve asked. Look at the authentication method, I said, pointing at the screen. To sign a Docune Level 3 document, you need a one-time password sent to the registered mobile number. Your number. The analyst noted. But I didn't have my phone. I repeated. Run a diagnostic on my carrier logs. Check for call forwarding or SMS diversion. The analyst worked for 5 minutes in silence. The only sound was the clicking of keys and the hum of the hard drives. Here it is, he said. His voice flat. On November 14th, a request was made to your mobile carrier to add a secondary family line with SMS syncing enabled. The request was authorized by the primary account holder, my father, I said. He synced my text messages to a burner phone. When the bank sent the OTP code to authorize the loan signature, it went to him. Not me. He signed my name, entered the code he stole, and approved the loan from his study while I was at work. It was identity theft. It was wire fraud. It was a federal crime committed by the man who used to check under my bed for monsters. Keep digging, Genevieve said. Her voice hard. If they did this, they did more. We moved to the Heart Foundation accounts. This was the Holy Grail. My grandmother had endowed this charity with $50 million to support art education and women's shelters. I see a series of withdrawals starting 3 weeks ago, I said, tracing the lines on the spreadsheet. Code labeled capital investment, green logistics. For transfers, $500,000 each, $2 million total. The foundation charter forbids speculative investments, Genevieve said. We only invest in treasury bonds and blue-chip index funds who authorized a venture capital injection. I clicked on the authorization file approved by voting proxy holder Tyler Lawson, grantor Harper Lawson. I stared at the screen. But I didn't sign the proxy. That is what he was trying to make me sign last night on the porch. Look at the date on the file, the analyst pointed out. Date pending execution. They moved the money before they had the signature. I realized they transferred the $2 million in anticipation of bullying me into signing. The money is already gone. It is sitting in Tyler's account right now. So if I had signed last night, I trailed off. If you had signed, Genevieve finished, standing up and walking to the window, you would have retroactively authorized the theft. You would have legally agreed that you as a board member. Told them to move that money. And when the IRS audited the foundation and saw that $2 million went to a shell company owned by your brother, who would be the one responsible for misuse of charitable funds? Me, I whispered. I would be the grantor. I would be the one who broke the charter. They set you up to be the fall guy. Genevieve said Tyler gets the money. Robert gets the debt cleared. And when the regulators come, they point to the document with your signature and say, Harper authorized it. She must have been confused. I felt a cold rage settle over me. It was different from the anger I felt last night. Last night was emotional. This was structural. This was a blueprint for my destruction. But there is something they forgot, Genevieve said, turning back to me with a small, dangerous smile. They forgot who built the system. She walked over to the laptop and typed in a master administrator password. The screen flashed red for a second, then opened a hidden directory. I knew Tyler would try to raid the foundation eventually, she said. So 5 years ago, I installed a tripwire in the banking protocol. We call it a honeypot in the industry. She pointed to the green logistics transfer line. See that routing code? She asked. It looks like a standard wire transfer, but it is not. Any transfer over $100,000 that goes to a non-verified vendor automatically triggers a suspense account. The money leaves the foundation. So, it looks like the transaction is complete to the sender, but it does not actually land in the recipient's account. It sits in a holding escrow managed by the bank's fraud department for 48 hours. So, Tyler doesn't have the money? I asked. He thinks he does, she said. His banking dashboard shows the pending credit. He has probably already started spending it, but the cash is frozen. And more importantly, the attempt to move it automatically generated a suspicious activity report that was sent directly to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division this morning. She looked at me. I didn't just catch them, Harper. I let them walk into a bank vault and lock the door from the inside. I looked at the screen. I saw the trail of evidence, the forged loan, the SMS hijacking, the unauthorized wire transfers, the fake investment firm. It wasn't a family tragedy anymore. It was a RICO case. What do you want to do? Genevieve asked. We can stop here. We can use this to force them to settle, to give you your freedom and disappear. Or she let the sentence hang in the air. I looked at the HP Consulting logo. I thought about my mother raising her champagne glass while I froze. I thought about Tyler throwing my empty bag into the snow. I thought about my father telling me I didn't belong. I didn't want a settlement. I didn't want an apology. I looked at the analyst. Do you have a printer? Yes. Mom. Print it, I said. Print everything. The carrier logs. The IP checks. The loan documents. The wire transfers. Printed in triplicate. Harper. Genevieve asked softly. I don't want to scream at them, I said. Watching the printer whir to life. The sound of the paper feeding through the roller was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. Screaming is for victims. Auditors don't scream. We just publish the report. I picked up the first page of the stack. The forged loan document with my stolen name. They wanted to use paper to destroy me, I said, sliding the page into a fresh manila folder. So, I am going to bury them with it. The silence of the St. and Julian Hotel suite was deceptive. While Genevieve and I sat in the climate-controlled quiet of the penthouse, drinking espresso and organizing 3-inch binders of evidence, the world outside was getting loud. My family realized they could not win a war of facts. The evidence regarding the loan fraud and the charity embezzlement was too concrete, printed in black and white on the documents stacked on the mahogany desk. So they did what desperate, morally bankrupt people always do when the walls start closing in. They stopped arguing the law and started attacking the character of the prosecutor. It started at 8 o'clock in the morning on January 2nd. My phone, which I had finally reconnected to a new secure number, Pinged with a notification. It was a Google alert I had set up for my own name years ago. A vanity metric that had suddenly become an early warning system. New mention Denver Society Watch. I clicked the link. The headline made my stomach turn over. Aries unhinged. The resurrection of Genevieve Hart and the granddaughter who manipulated it. I read the article. My hands gripping the tablet so hard my knuckles turned white. It was a masterpiece of fiction. Anonymous sources, clearly my mother and father, painted a picture of a tragic senile matriarch who had been dragged out of hiding by a greedy, unstable granddaughter. Sources close to the family say that Harper Lawson, 33, has been estranged for months due to financial disputes. The article read, they claim she has taken advantage of her grandmother's cognitive decline, staging a dramatic New Year's Eve scene to seize control of the historic Hartwell estate. We are just worried about Mother, said Robert Lawson in a statement. She is clearly confused and being isolated by someone who does not have her best interests at heart. They are calling you senile, I said, my voice shaking with rage. They are saying I kidnapped you. Genevieve did not look up from the spreadsheet she was reviewing. Of course they are. If I am sane, they are criminals. If I am senile, they are just concerned guardians trying to protect the family fortune from a rogue element. It is their only play. But it is a lie, I shouted, standing up and pacing the room. People are reading this. My colleagues at Cedarбridge. My friends. Look at Instagram, Genevieve said calmly. I opened the app. Tyler had posted 10 minutes ago. It was a black and white photo of him looking out a window, brooding and pensive. The caption was a masterclass in vague victimhood. Sad start to the new year. It is crazy how money changes people. You think you know your sister, and then you find out she has been plotting against the family for months. Praying for my grandmother's clarity of mind. We will protect you, Grandma. The truth will come out. Family first. Toxic Hartwell legacy. The comments were already flooding in. Stay strong. Time money reveals true colors. Man, hope your grandma is okay. I felt like I was being suffocated. They were rewriting reality in real time to the world. I wasn't the victim of identity theft and financial abuse. I was the villain. I was the unstable daughter my father had warned everyone about at the party. Then came the legal threat. At 10:30 in the morning, a courier arrived at the hotel suite. He handed me a thick envelope from Sterling Moss, the firm that represented my father. I ripped it open. It was a cease and desist letter threatening a lawsuit for defamation, elder abuse, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. You are hereby ordered to cease all communication regarding the Hart Foundation finances. The letter warned. You are to surrender immediate custody of Genevieve Hart to her appointed medical proxies, Robert and Diana Lawson. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action, seeking conservatorship over Miss Lawson and restraining orders against you. They want to put you in a conservatorship, I said, handing the letter to Genevieve. They want to declare you incompetent so they can legally ignore everything you say. Genevieve read the letter. She didn't tear it up. She didn't throw it across the room. She folded it neatly and placed it in the evidence pile. They're scared, she said. They don't look scared, I argued, pointing at the tablet where Tyler was now live streaming a thank you to his followers for their support. They look confident. They are winning the court of public opinion. Grandma, by the time we get to a judge, everyone in Boulder will think I'm a monster. Genevieve stood up. She walked over to me and placed her hands on my shoulders. Her grip was firm, grounding. Harper, look at me. I looked into her gray eyes. Public opinion is a vapor, she said. It changes with the wind. Do you know what does not change? Wire transfer logs, IP addresses, signatures. They are using emotion because it is cheap and fast. We are using data. Data is slow, but it is heavy. And when it lands, it crushes everything underneath it. She checked her watch. It was a vintage Cartier tank watch. Small and understated. "We have a meeting at 1 o'clock at the offices of Hawthorne Pierce," she announced. Hawthorne Pierce. I asked the corporate firm. "Why?" "Because I called a meeting of the Hart Foundation board," she said. "I invited the bank representatives, the external auditors, and your family. We are going to settle this. Dad won't come," I said. "He thinks you are senile. He will come," she corrected. "Because I told the bank that if he does not appear to answer questions regarding the account freeze, I will pull the entire Hart portfolio, all $200 million of it, and move it to JP Morgan by 5 o'clock today. Robert is leveraged. He needs the bank to trust him. He will be there." The offices of Hawthorne Pierce were located in the tallest skyscraper in Denver. The conference room they had assigned to us was on the 45th floor. A glass box floating in the sky overlooking the snow-capped Rockies. It was a room designed to intimidate. The table was a 20-foot slab of marble. The chairs were black leather. The air smelled of conditioned oxygen and fear. I walked in at 12:55. I was wearing a sharp black suit Genevieve had delivered to the hotel. My hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. I carried the heavy binder of evidence in my arms like a shield. My family was already there. They sat on the left side of the table. My father, Robert, looked impeccable in his navy suit, but there were dark circles under his eyes. My mother, Diana, wore a beige dress that made her look fragile and sympathetic. Tyler was tapping furiously on his phone, probably checking his engagement numbers. On the right side of the table sat the neutrals. There was Mr. Ma Henderson, the regional vice president of the bank. There were 3 members of the foundation board, older men who looked like they would rather be playing golf than witnessing a family execution. And there was a woman I didn't recognize, a forensic accountant from the firm. Looking stern and ready, Genevieve walked to the head of the table. She didn't sit. She stood, placing her hands on the cold marble. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she said. Her voice was calm, devoid of the dementia my father had claimed she suffered from. "Mother," my father started using his patronizing courtroom voice, "we are only here because we are concerned. You are clearly not well. Harper has dragged you into this. Be quiet, Robert." Genevieve said she didn't shout. She just dropped the command like a stone. "We are not here to discuss my health. We are here to discuss the $2 million missing from the foundation. There is no money missing." Tyler spoke up, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "It was an investment allocation. I have the paperwork right here." Harper signed the proxy. He slid a paper across the table toward the bank vice president. Tyler said, "Voting proxy signed by Harper Lawson. It authorizes the transfer to Green Logistics for capital growth. It is all standard." Mr. Henderson picked up the paper. He looked at it, then looked at me. "M. Lawson, is this your signature?" I stood up. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced them to hold me. I walked to the whiteboard at the front of the room. "It is a digital image of my signature," I said clearly. But I did not place it there. "Oh, here we go." My mother sighed dramatically. She is in denial. She forgets things just like you, Mother. "I do not forget where I was on November 15th, I said. I opened my binder. I took out the first document, the carrier log from the mobile phone company. "This is a subpoena-ready log from Verizon," I said, sliding it to the center of the table. "It shows that on the day the loan was signed and on the day the proxy was created, my SMS authentication codes were being diverted to a secondary number." I pointed a finger at my father. "That number," I said, my voice steady, "is registered to a burner phone purchase with a corporate credit card issued to Robert Lawson." The room went silent. The bank vice president picked up the log. He adjusted his glasses. "Robert." Mr. Henderson said, his voice dropping an octave. Is this true? It is a fabrication. My father blustered, his face turning red. Harper printed that off the internet. You cannot trust these documents. She is hysterical. We also have the IP logs. Continued. Ignoring him. The digital signature was applied from an IP address located at Hartwell House. I was at the Cedar Bridge offices in Denver at that exact time. I have security camera footage of me entering and leaving the building. I slid the second document across the table. And finally, I said, playing the ace. We have the banking trace on the green logistics transfer. I looked at Tyler. His smirk was faltering. You think you moved $2 million to your startup? I said. But you didn't. The Foundation's security protocols flagged the transfer as suspicious because the recipient account belongs to a shell company with no business history. Tyler sat up straighter. That is a lie. The money is in my account. I saw the balance. You saw a provisional credit, Genevieve interrupted. The bank froze the actual funds 48 hours ago. Mr. Henderson nodded slowly. That is correct. The funds are currently held in escrow pending a fraud investigation. Fraud? My mother gasped. How dare you? My son is an entrepreneur. Your son is an embezzler. Diana. Genevieve said. And your husband is an identity thief. This is a witch hunt. My father stood up, slamming his hand on the table. I am the executive of this estate. I have the power of attorney. I can manage these assets however I see fit. You cannot ambush me in a law firm and accuse me of crimes based on spreadsheets made by a jealous daughter. Genevieve said. And I did. I am leaving. My father announced, buttoning his jacket. And I am taking my mother to a doctor. This meeting is over. We will let the courts decide who is competent. Sit down. Robert. Genevieve said. No. He sneered. You have no power here. You are a ghost. Remember? Come on. Tyler. Diana. They started to gather their things. They looked arrogant. Untouchable. They thought they could just walk out, spin the story to the press, and bury us in litigation for years. They thought that because they were rich and powerful, the rules didn't apply to them. I said. The meeting is over, my father shouted, moving toward the door. The meeting is over, I said, watching the heavy glass door at the back of the room. But the investigation is just starting. My father reached for the door handle. Before he could touch it, the door swung open from the outside. It wasn't a secretary. It wasn't a waiter with more water. A man in a dark suit stepped into the room. He was followed by two others. They didn't look like lawyers. They looked like people who didn't bill by the hour because they were paid by the taxpayers. The lead man reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't pull out a business card. He pulled out a leather wallet and flipped it open. The gold shield inside caught the overhead lights, flashing a reflection that silenced the room instantly. Robert Lawson? The man asked. His voice was polite, professional, and absolutely terrifying. My father froze. Yet, I am Special Agent Miller with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes Division, the man said. He looked at Tyler, then at my mother, and finally rested his gaze back on my father. We received a suspicious activity report regarding wire fraud and bank fraud involving the Hart Foundation. We have a warrant to seize all electronic devices belonging to you, your wife, and your son. My mother let out a small strangled sound. Tyler dropped his phone on the marble table with a clatter. I believe, Agent Miller said, stepping fully into the room and blocking the exit, that you were just discussing the whereabouts of $2 million. We would very much like to be part of that conversation. The air in the conference room on the 45th floor did not just shift. It shattered. The arrival of Special Agent Miller had the effect of a grenade thrown into a dinner party. The silence that followed his introduction was absolute, broken only by the hum of the building's ventilation system and the frantic, shallow breathing of my mother. "This is absurd." "My father," Robert said, though his voice lacked its usual courtroom resonance. He stood up, smoothing his jacket with trembling hands, trying to physically inhabit the role of the powerful attorney he used to be. "Agent Miller, surely you understand that this is a domestic misunderstanding. We are a grieving family. Emotions ran high over the holidays. There is no need to involve the federal government in a private dispute over trust management." Agent Miller did not blink. He walked to the marble table and placed a heavy file in the center. It made a dull authoritative thud. "Mr. Lawson," Miller said, his tone conversational but laced with steel, "we are not here because of a family dispute. We are here because 3 separate independent witnesses, 2 catering staff, and 1 security guard named Davis have sworn affidavit that on the night of December 31st, you and your son held Ms. Harper Lawson's physical safety hostage in exchange for a signature on a financial instrument. Under federal law, utilizing fear or physical distress to compel the transfer of assets across state lines, which the Hart Foundation funds are, is not a domestic dispute. It is extortion." My mother let out a whimper. "We just wanted her to be reasonable. She was cold. That is all. We let her back in eventually." "You let her back in when the police were called by a third party," Miller corrected, looking at Genevieve. "And frankly, Mrs. Lawson, the coercion is just the cherry on top. The cake is the $2 million your son attempted to wire to a Cayman Islands shell company, and the $250,000 your husband borrowed, using a stolen identity. It was a bridge loan." My father shouted, his composure snapping. "I intended to pay it back. I am the executive. I have implied consent. There is no such thing as implied consent for forgery, Robert." The lawyer from the bank, Mr. Henderson, cut in. His voice was cold, professional, and final. "We have reviewed the digital signatures. We have reviewed the carrier logs Harper provided. You impersonated a client to defraud a federally insured institution. That is not a family matter. That is 20 years in federal prison." My father collapsed back into his chair. For the first time in my life, I saw him not as a giant, but as a small, terrified man who had believed his own lies for so long he had forgotten they were illegal. Genevieve stepped forward. She looked at the wreckage of her family with eyes that were dry and hard as flint. "You thought you were immune," she said softly. "You thought that because you carried the Hart name, the laws of mathematics and morality did not apply to you. You thought you could wait me out. You thought that once the old woman was in the ground, the buffet was open." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a single document. It was bound in blue legal paper. "But you forgot that I wrote the menu," she said. She slid the document down the long marble table. It stopped right in front of Tyler. "What is this?" Tyler asked, his voice shaking. "That," Genevieve said, "is the 3rd addendum to the Hart Family Trust. I signed it 3 days before I went to Zurich. It is a living will clause with a specific trigger condition." Tyler opened it. His eyes scanned the legal text. I saw his face turn the color of ash. "Read the highlighted paragraph, Tyler," Genevieve commanded. "Read it out loud." Tyler swallowed hard. He looked at the agents, then at his parents, then at the paper. "In the event," Tyler read, his voice cracking, "that any beneficiary is found to have engaged in financial malfeasance, fraud, or exploitation against any other member of the family or the estate, their beneficial interest in the trust is immediately and irrevocably terminated." "Keep reading," Genevieve said. "This termination," Tyler whispered, "extends to all future disbursements, all current holdings, and bans the beneficiary from residing on any property owned by the Hart Trust. The room went deadly silent. It means, Genevieve said that the moment you hit send on that wire transfer, Tyler, you disinherited yourself. It means the moment you signed my name, Robert, you evicted yourself. You are not just facing jail. You are broke as of this morning. You do not have a house. You do not have an allowance. You do not even have a country club membership. You can't do this. My mother screamed, standing up. We are your family. You can't leave us with nothing. I am not leaving you with nothing. Diana. Genevieve said. I am leaving you with exactly what you earned. Then the rats began to eat each other. Tyler slammed the document shut. He looked at Agent Miller. His eyes wide and manic. The golden boy was gone. In his place was a cornered animal. I didn't know. Tyler shouted, pointing a shaking finger at our father. It was him. It was Dad. He told me the transfer was legal. He told me the structure was set up to optimize tax flow. I just did what he told me. Tyler. My father gasped, looking at his son in betrayal. Don't look at me like that, Tyler yelled, standing up and backing away from the table. You are the lawyer. You said Harper was being difficult and we just needed to bypass her. You said the foundation money was ours anyway. I am just a startup founder. I don't know the compliance laws. I was following the executive's orders. He is lying. My father roared. He came to me begging for the money. He said he owed loan sharks in Vegas. That is why we needed the cash so fast. Stop it. My mother sobbed. Both of you. Stop it. It was Dad's idea to clone Harper's phone. Tyler continued, sweating profusely. He bought the burner phone. He set it up. The forensic accountant, the woman who had been silent until now, cleared her throat. She tapped a key on her laptop, projecting a new image onto the smart screen at the front of the room. Actually, she said, her voice cool and detached. While Mr. Lawson did purchase the phone, the digital trail regarding the lockout suggests a different architect for the emotional pressure campaign. The screen displayed an email thread. The subject line was Subject Problem Resolution NYE. The sender was Tyler Lawson. The recipient was Robert Lawson. I read the text on the screen. Dad, Harper is going to check the books. She is an auditor. It is what she does. If she gets into the house before she signs the waiver, she will see the HP transfers. We need to isolate her. Change the locks. Don't let her in until she signs. If she is cold and scared, she will fold. She always folds. She is weak. Let's break her resolve before she even gets through the door. The air left my lungs. I stared at the screen. She is weak. She always folds. I turned my head slowly to look at my brother. My big brother. The one I had bailed out of jail. The one I had co-signed loans for. The one I had defended to every girlfriend who dumped him and every boss who fired him. He wasn't just a parasite. He was a predator. He had not just gone along with my father's plan. He had designed the cruelty. He had suggested the freezing cold. He had weaponized my own biology against me. He knew I got cold easily. He knew I had anxiety about being excluded. He had taken the things he knew about me as my brother and sharpened them into shivs. I whispered. It was your idea. Tyler looked at me for a second. The mask slipped completely. There was no remorse in his eyes. There was only annoyance that he had been caught. You were in the way, Harper, he said, his voice dropping to a petulant sneer. You are always in the way. You with your little rules and your spreadsheets. You think you are so much better than us because you have a job. You're just a buzzkill. We needed the money. You wouldn't give it. So, I made a business decision. A business decision? I repeated. my voice rising. You left me to freeze on a mountain. Oh, grow up. Tyler spat. It was 20 minutes. You are so dramatic. This is exactly why Grandma shouldn't trust you. You take everything so personally. Mr. Lawson. Agent Miller stepped forward, placing a hand on his handcuffs. I think that is enough. Genevieve turned her chair. She wasn't looking at Tyler. She wasn't looking at the agents. She was looking at me. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes were intense. This was the final test. She had stripped them of their money. She had exposed their crimes, but she couldn't give me the one thing I needed most. She couldn't give me closure. I had to take it. Harper, she said softly. The room waited. The FBI agents paused. My parents looked at me with a sudden, desperate hope. They saw the hesitation. They thought perhaps the old Harper, the fixer, the pleaser. The doormat was still in there. You have the evidence, Genevieve said. You have the power. The agents are ready to arrest them. The bank is ready to seize the assets. But you are the victim of the identity theft. You are the victim of the extortion. If you want to drop the charges, if you want to say this was all a misunderstanding to keep the family name out of the papers, you can. My mother's eyes widened. Harper, please, she whispered. We are your family. We made a mistake. But prison for your father. For your brother. Think about what people will say. Think about the humiliation. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. Just tell them to stop. My father nodded vigorously. We will pay it back. Harper. I swear we will make it right. Just don't let them take us. Tyler didn't beg. He just looked at me. Calculating the odds. Betting on my guilt. Betting on the fact that for 33 years I had never said no. Do you want to keep the peace? Genevieve asked. Do you want to save them? I looked at them. I looked at my father, the man who stole my name. I looked at my mother, the woman who watched me freeze and drank champagne. I looked at Tyler, the brother who called me weak and planned my torture via email. I thought about the peace they wanted me to keep. It wasn't peace. It was silence. It was the silence of a victim who agrees to be hurt quietly so the neighbors don't hear. I thought about the stable daughter, the one who absorbed the shocks, the one who signed the papers. And then I looked at the empty chair next to me, the chair where the old Harper used to sit. She was gone. She had frozen to death on the porch of Hartwell House at midnight. I took a breath. It felt clean. It felt like oxygen. No, I said. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Harper, my mother shrieked. No, I said again. Louder. I looked directly at Genevieve. I do not want to keep the peace. I spent my whole life keeping the peace. And they used it to hang me. I turned to Agent Miller. I pointed at the stack of evidence. I am pressing charges, I said, my voice ringing off the glass walls. For the identity theft. For the wire fraud. For the extortion. I want all of it on the record. Harper. You are destroying this family. My father yelled. I didn't destroy this family, I said, looking him in the eye. I audited it. I turned back to Genevieve. I don't want their apologies, I said. And I don't want their peace. I want them to give me back my life. Agent Miller nodded. He signaled to his team. Robert Lawson. Tyler Lawson. Miller said, pulling the handcuffs from his belt. Please stand up and place your hands behind your backs. You are under arrest. As the metal clicked around Tyler's wrists, he looked at me one last time. You are cold. Harper. He spat. You are stone cold. I watched them drag him toward the door. I learned from the best, I said. The conference room at Hawthorne Pierce emptied out slowly, leaving behind the stale scent of anxiety and the crisp smell of fresh ink. The federal agents had left 20 minutes ago, escorting my father and brother into the service elevator to avoid the press that was already gathering in the lobby. My mother had been allowed to leave separately, supposedly to call a defense attorney, but I knew she was likely finding the nearest restroom to fix her mascara and construct a new narrative where she was the unsuspecting victim of her husband's schemes. I sat at the marble table, watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of sunlight cutting through the high windows. Genevieve sat opposite me. She did not look triumphant. She looked tired. But it was the clean, satisfied exhaustion of a builder who has finally cleared the rubble from a construction site. "Here," she said, sliding a final document toward me. It was not a waiver. It was not a transfer of liability. It was a contract of employment and stewardship. "This appoints you as the independent monitor for the Hart Foundation and the primary trustee for the family estate," Genevieve explained, capping her fountain pen. "It means that from this moment forward, not a single penny leaves the accounts without your biometric authorization. It means you have full legal indemnity. It means that if Robert or Tyler ever want to buy so much as a pack of gum with family money, they have to ask you." Picked up the pen. My hand did not shake. For the first time in my life, I wasn't signing away my power to keep the peace. I was signing to enforce it. I wrote my name, Harper Lawson. The ink dried instantly, sealing the new reality. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a notification from the bank. Alert: account access restored. Status active. Balance available. I tapped the screen. The red banners that had barred me from my own life the night before were gone. The fraudulent loan my father had taken out in my name was listed at the bottom, but it was now grayed out, tagged with a bright red label. Frozen. Pending criminal investigation. It was no longer my debt. It was evidence. "It is over," I whispered, the air rushing back into my lungs. "The crime is over," Genevieve corrected, standing up and buttoning her coat. "The consequences are just beginning." "Come." "We have one last stop to make." We returned to Hartwell House in the late afternoon. The winter sun was dipping behind the mountains, casting long purple shadows across the snow. The driveway was plowed and salted. The front door, which Davis had kicked in just hours ago, had already been temporarily repaired by a locksmith, but the atmosphere had changed completely. The party debris was gone. The streamers, the empty champagne bottles, the lingering smell of desperate socialization. All of it had been scrubbed away. The house stood silent and imposing, a fortress that had finally expelled the invaders. As our car pulled up, I saw a sedan parked near the gate. My mother was standing outside of it, arguing with Davis. My father was sitting in the passenger seat, looking pale and shrunken. They had made bail white-collar privileges a powerful thing, but they had returned to find their key codes deactivated and their biometric access wiped from the server. Genevieve stayed in the car. "This part is yours," she said. I stepped out into the cold air. It was just as freezing as it had been at midnight, but I didn't feel it. I was wearing a wool coat that cost $2,000, bought with my own money, and I was fueled by a fire that would never go out again. My mother saw me. Her face crumpled. She rushed toward the gate, grabbing the iron bars like a prisoner. "Harper," she cried, her voice shrill with panic. "Thank God. Tell this man to let us in. We need to get our things. We need to rest. Your father's heart is weak." I stopped 5 feet away. I looked at her. I looked for the mother who used to read me bedtime stories, but I couldn't find her. I only saw the woman who had toasted my eviction through a glass pane. "You cannot come in." "Mom," I said calmly. "The living will clause triggered. You have been evicted from the estate." "Evicted?" my father yelled from the car, opening his door and stumbling out. "I built the portfolio that paid for the heating in this house. You cannot kick me out of my own home. It is not your home." "Dad," I said, It is Grandma's home. And you stole from her. You stole from me. We were protecting the legacy, he shouted, his face twisting into ugly lines of rage. You ungrateful child. I gave you everything. I gave you your education. I gave you your job. And this is how you repay me by siding with a senile old woman and the feds. I am siding with the truth, I said. And the truth is you committed a felony. My mother switched tactics. She reached through the bars trying to touch my arm. Harper, please be reasonable. Where will we go? The accounts are frozen. We have no cash. It is winter. You cannot leave your parents on the street. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. It is cold out here. Isn't it? I asked softly. My mother froze. She remembered. I stood on that porch for 20 minutes. I said. I begged you to let me in. I begged for my coat. Do you remember what you did? Mom, you drank your champagne and turned your back. That was different. She sobbed. We were trying to teach you a lesson. And now I am teaching you one. I said. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from Tyler. He was likely at a lawyer's office or maybe a bar. Harper. Pick up. The investors are pulling out. The news is everywhere. They are calling it a Ponzi scheme. You have to issue a statement. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I had authorization. If you don't, I go to jail. Please. I am your brother. I looked at the text. I thought about the business decision email. I thought about him throwing my bag into the snow. I typed my reply. I am not paying your price this year. I hit send. Then I blocked the number. I looked back at my parents. My father was still screaming about his rights. My mother was weeping. Her face buried in her hands. They looked small. They looked pathetic. And for the first time in 33 years, I didn't feel the urge to fix it. I didn't feel the need to open the gate, write a check, or smooth things over. I felt nothing but a profound, quiet relief. Davis, I said to the guard. Yet, Lawson. Davis answered, standing at attention. If they are not off the property in 5 minutes, I said. Call the police and have them arrested for trespassing. Understood, Davis said. I turned my back on them. I walked up the driveway, the snow crunching under my boots. I heard my mother screaming my name, but I didn't turn around. I didn't look back. I walked toward the warm golden light of the front door where Genevieve was waiting that night. Dinner was not a banquet. There were no waiters. No crystal flutes. No heavy silver platters. We sat at the small kitchen island, Genevieve and I, eating tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches that we had made ourselves. The house was quiet. The frantic energy of the party was gone, replaced by the settling groans of the old timber and the whistling of the wind outside. It felt empty. Yet, but it also felt clean. It felt like a house that had been exorcised. Are you okay? Genevieve asked, dipping a piece of crusty bread into her soup. I don't know, I admitted. I just sent my parents to a motel. My brother is facing 10 years in prison. I feel like I amputated a limb. You did, Genevieve said. But it was gang wrasse. Harper. If you hadn't cut it off, it would have killed you. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was dry and paper thin, but her grip was strong. You have a chance now, she said. A chance to build a life that actually belongs to you. Not to Robert. Not to Tyler. To you. I looked around the kitchen. I thought about my job at Cedarbridge. I thought about the skills. I had the ability to find the truth in the numbers, to see the patterns everyone else missed. I had spent so long using those skills to protect the people who hurt me. Now I could use them to protect myself. I think I am going to resign from Cedarbridge, I said suddenly. The thought hadn't existed 10 seconds ago, but now that it was out, Felt like the only truth. I want to run the foundation properly. I want to audit the entire estate. I want to make sure no one ever uses the Hart name to hurt anyone again. Genevieve smiled. It was a genuine smile. One that reached her eyes. I was hoping you would say that. I looked up at the clock on the wall above the oven. The hands were ticking steadily. It was 12:30 in the morning. 24 hours and 30 minutes ago. I had stood on the other side of that door, thinking my life was over. I had thought that the sound of the lock clicking shut was the sound of my world ending. I had thought that being kicked out into the cold was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. I realize now that I was wrong. Being kicked out was the gift. If they had opened the door, if they had let me in, if I had signed those papers to get warm, I would have stayed inside the trap forever. I would have spent the rest of my life trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. I would have frozen to death inside that warm house slowly over decades. The lock clicking shut hadn't locked me out. It had locked them in. It had locked them in with their lies and their greed, and it had set me free. I looked at Genevieve. I looked at the steam rising from my soup. I looked at the dark window where the snow was falling softly, covering the tracks of the people who used to live here. Happy New Year. Grandma, I said, raising my mug of tea. Genevieve clinked her mug against mine. Happy New Year. Harper. Zorro had passed a long time ago. But for the first time in my life, the clock was finally running on my time. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from. So, please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on Harper's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the HOA Karen Vlog channel, like this video, and hit that button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.